My response to Forrest 51,690's thoughts on the Cambrian Explosion. He said, I've been thinking, the Cambrian Explosion doesn't make sense in terms of evolution, but it makes sense in terms of creation. Well, not really, because the Cambrian Explosion lasted about 60 to 100 million years. It didn't happen overnight, so nonetheless, evolution still had to take place. It just took place at a much faster rate than today. He said, it makes sense that there would be less organisms now. Yeah, it does make sense that there would be less organisms now, especially since there were 6 major extinction events. The Killwasser and Hangenberg events, for one example, the KT boundary extinction event, which killed off the dinosaurs. Because of this, there's been a gradual decline in organisms since the Cambrian Explosion, but the Cambrian Explosion actually marks a rapid increase in the amount of organisms there are. He said, every single organism that is alive today existed in the Cambrian Explosion. Again, this is false since, well, for one, during the Cambrian Explosion, there was no life on land, no plants, fungi, or animals on land. And as you can see, that's clearly not the case now. But I think what he is trying to say is that most of the modern phyla did appear then. This is true, but not the modern species. That is false. He said, whatever the rate was, it was much more than it is now. Again, this is true, but this isn't a problem for evolution. The only problem is we need to figure out what specifically caused it. We know that the Cambrian Explosion happened right after an ice age. It also happened about the time mesozooplankton were evolved. To understand how this has to do anything with the Cambrian Explosion, look at my other video on the Cambrian Explosion. His next comment was, would you prefer that your child has a genetic mutation? And he makes a joke about carrying around uranium. Well, mutations are going to happen whether you prefer it or not. And this genetic mutation really has nothing to do with uranium. Uranium would cause liver damage and cancer, but you wouldn't pass any of these mutations down to your children. These would happen to your body. He said that there's only a few examples of mutations, such as nylonase, but there are no new structures being evolved today. Well, as in the sense of within this day, no, there isn't. Other than microorganisms such as nylonase, like you mentioned. But evolution's a very slow process, like mountain formation or plate tectonics. Even the Himalayan mountains, which are still being formed today, partially, they're pretty much done, but they're still being formed today, began, I think, over 2 million years ago. Way, way before there's even humans. Just to give you an example of how slow this process is. He said, there's not half-evolved animals. They're all fully evolved. I guess you're talking about transitional fossils here. Since half-evolved doesn't really make sense, I'm going to guess that you mean organisms that have about half the traits we see today. But of course, if we found half an organism, this would be a problem for evolution. Transitional fossils are representations of organisms that are half one mother species and half one daughter species, slowly moving more towards the daughter species, of course. Take whale evolution, for example. We start with the Pakicetus. After a while, we have the Cuchacetus. I don't know if I said that right. Then we have the Mammaliodon. The Pakicetus, of course, was perfectly tailored to its environment on land. The Cuchacetus was perfectly tapered to its environment, half land, half water. And Mammaliodon is perfectly tapered to its environment of being fully in water. At not one point does evolution predict a half-evolved organism, rather organisms that are fully evolved for their specific environment. For whatever reason, Pakicetus eventually moved into the ocean and gradually evolved accordingly. He said, you only see the organisms at the nodes, not in between organisms. You don't see in between organisms. I might have got that quote wrong, but the basic idea is there. He's talking about the nodes of phylogenetic trees, where you only see the organisms at the ends, not, it doesn't show the common ancestors on these trees. But how organisms are plotted on a hypothetical tree is irrelevant. We still have the common ancestors nonetheless, even if it's not on the tree. You don't see organisms in between organisms because the phylogenetic trees are used to show evolutionary relationships inferred from the organism's genotypes and or phenotypes. This is used to predict common ancestors that we do later on find. He said something about we don't find mouth-formed arm with a bone that you kind of step on. Not really sure what you're talking about here, but I'm guessing we're going back to the whole half-evolved animals thing. And again, if we found half-evolved animals with a bone that you kind of step on and not a fully formed leg, this would be a problem for evolution, because how would this organism even survive in its environment? How would it pass on its genes? So this doesn't make sense. Finally, he said it could be, he's talking about how organisms got structured throughout the fossil layers, where there's simple organisms at the bottom, complex organisms on top. He said that it could be explained by the swirling organism, the swirling action of the water, something to that extent. Again, I didn't quote him perfectly, but you can see the video for yourself. This is basically what he's talking about. Nowhere has swirling action of water been known to organize in organisms or anything in any kind of fashion that you're talking about. I've never heard of swirling water causing this effect. Please, if you have an example of this, please educate me. I would love to be educated. That's why I'm on YouTube wasting my life. I don't even really know how this counts as an explanation. The only thing that your idea of swirling water and an explanation have in common is that they both have words, but it doesn't really make any sort of attempt to explain anything. So anyway, this has been my response, and obviously disagree with you a lot here. Anyway, I'm not good at endings, so I'm just gonna hit this